Welcome to this detailed analysis where we turn our attention to a name known in, well, pretty much every corner of the world, stamped on millions of pints daily. Guinness.
But today, we're not really focusing on the beer itself.
No, we're conducting a thorough exploration of the source material concerning the man who started it all, Arthur Guinness, born around 1725. He was an 18th century powerhouse, an entrepreneur, a political lobbyist, and a social reformer whose life reveals so much more about Georgian Ireland than just the history of stout.
That's our mission, really. The sources paint a picture of Arthur Guinness that is both monumental and, surprisingly ambiguous.
His legacy is so huge it almost hides the person.
It completely obscures the complex details of his early life, his pivotal business moves, and the surprising contradictions in his political profile. We are going to chart his journey from a relatively modest upbringing in County Kildare to the founder of a globally significant empire.
And we'll be paying close attention to the specifics of that famous 9,000-year contract, his tenacious defense of his brewery, and his unique approach to social activism.
Exactly.
So let's unpack this, starting where all biographies must, the beginning. And right away, we hit a wall of historical uncertainty.
We do.
The sources note that even during his lifetime, and certainly afterward, there was this persistent lack of clear records about Arthur Guinness's true heritage. It seems even he was navigating a complex, inherited identity.
That's a crucial point. Arthur Guinness himself genuinely believed he was descended from the Magennises of Ive.
And who were they, exactly?
This was a family of Gaelic Catholic nobles, powerful historical figures who had, over time, converted to Protestantism. This particular branch had changed their name to Guinness after the Viscount Magennis fled Ireland following the Battle of the Boyne in 1690.
So for Arthur, claiming that lineage, that was a big deal.
Oh, it was huge. It placed him firmly within the historical framework of the Anglo-Irish Protestant ascendancy. It suggested a noble, if, complicated pedigree.
And he really leaned into this belief, didn't he? I read that later in life, he incorporated the Magennis family crest, that blue shield with 3 gold lions, into his own personal symbols.
He did. But recent historical and scientific inquiry has introduced significant doubt to that self-identified heritage.
Right, and this is where it gets very modern.
It absolutely has. What's particularly fascinating is that DNA evidence has been used to trace his ancestral origins.
From the 18th century. Amazing.
Yes. Work done by researchers, including at Trinity College Dublin, suggests a completely different story. This research points toward his ancestors being the McCartans, another County Down family, who reportedly lived in a specific village called Guinness, right outside Ballynahinch.
So the name might come from a place, not a person.
Exactly. The findings suggest the surname may have been derived from a place, rather than being a conversion from Magennis. And this contradiction is just a perfect illustration of how challenging it is to pin down the absolute foundational details of a figure whose life predates comprehensive record-keeping.
So while that ancient family history is murky, we have slightly firmer, though still complex, details about his immediate family and his birth in County Kildare.
We do. His father was Richard Guinness, born around 1690 in County Kildare. And we see some of the earliest biographical rumors here, too.
Like what?
Like the suggestion that Richard was the illegitimate son of a couple who had fled Ireland, and that he was supposedly left at an orphanage in Leixlip.
Is there any truth to that?
Our sources suggest it's historically unlikely, probably just an early piece of romanticized history. What we do know for sure is that Richard married Elizabeth Reed, the daughter of a landowner in Clonallis, also in Kildare, likely in the early 1720s.
And the naming of Arthur. This is the first significant connection we have to his future success, or at least to the powerful social network he leveraged.
Precisely. Arthur was likely born at his maternal grandfather's estate in Clonallis, and he was named Arthur after his godfather, Arthur Price.
And Price wasn't just some local figure.
Not at all. He was a vicar in Selbridge at the time and a very influential one. This connection provided the Guinness family with access to a powerful patronage network, which was, it was essential for social and economic mobility in 18th century Ireland.
The date of birth itself is complicated by conflicting records, which is a detail that always surprises me, given how important the name is today.
It is a mess, actually. The date you most commonly see is September 24th, 1725. However, the Guinness Company, maybe for marketing or commemorative reasons, formally declared September 28th as his birth date, but only in 1991.
So that's a modern invention.
Pretty much. And if you look at the most solid, immediate evidence, his gravestone in Otter Ard, It suggests he was 78 when he died in January 1803.
Which would place his birth sometime in 1724.
Exactly. So we're working within an approximate 1 to 2 year window for the very start of his life.
What's truly remarkable to me is that this future global brewer didn't start in brewing at all. His first real career path was steeped in religious and administrative service following his father.
Yes, and this is the pivot point for his education and his social mobility. In August 1742, after his mother died, the young Arthur, then about 18, joined his father in working for his influential godfather, Arthur Price,
In what?
serving as a registrar.
Now, that might sound like a minor administrative job today, but we need to put this in an 18th century context. What did that role actually give him?
For a non-noble family, this job was invaluable. It wasn't just, rote work. It required demonstrable literacy, competence in arithmetic, and strong writing skills to maintain official records.
Skills that were not common.
Not at all. These were rare and highly sought-after capabilities. The job elevated his status significantly and equipped him with crucial administrative and organizational experience, the exact skills you would need to eventually run a complex industrial operation.
And that position gained even more weight in 1744 when Arthur Price was appointed Archbishop of Cashel.
An extremely prestigious and influential position within the Church of Ireland. The pay raises that came with that appointment naturally benefited his staff, including the Guinnesses.
So they were on the rise with him.
Exactly. Their administrative apprenticeship under Archbishop Price lasted 10 years, and it concluded with his death in July 1752. The sources show Price's estate was valued at a massive IR, £8,850.
A fortune.
A huge fortune. And the fact that both Arthur and his father were bequeathed £100 apiece from the estate is not just a gesture. It provided critical starting capital.
How much was £100 back then?
Well, to contextualize that, £100 in 1752 would have been worth the equivalent of a substantial annual salary for a skilled tradesman. It was enough to fund the beginning of a small business.
So he has the skills from the registrar job, and now he has the capital from the inheritance. But how did he make the jump from administering church records to commercial brewing?
There was prior exposure. His father, Richard, had remarried in 1752 to a woman named Elizabeth Clare. She was a widow who ran the White Hart Inn.
Public house.
Right. And Richard and his children worked at the inn, which would have been Arthur's first hands-on experience with the mechanics of the brewing and hospitality trade.
And it was even further back than that, wasn't it?
It was. Historical records confirm that his maternal grandfather, William Reed, had an ale license as far back as 1690. So while Arthur was formally trained in administration, the entrepreneurial itch and the foundational knowledge of brewing were clearly in the family background.
That context provides the perfect runway for his entrepreneurial leap, which starts not in Dublin, as many people think, but in Leixlip.
That's right. He wasn't just inheriting a family business, he was launching a commercial venture using his inheritance. In September 1755, Arthur invested his capital and purchased his first brewery in Leixlip.
And we have to see this as a strategic purchase, even if it was small scale compared to what came later.
It was absolutely strategic. It was a 3-story building located perfectly between the street and the River Liffey.
What were the key advantages of that location? Was it just convenience, or did it offer specific industrial benefits?
It offered crucial industrial advantages. Easy access to the River Liffey provided 2 essentials: a reliable, high-volume water supply for brewing, and power for the grist mill needed to grind the malt. Furthermore, Leixlip sits directly on the main Dublin to Galway road. This made it really easy to transport raw materials, specifically the hops, which were often sourced from Dublin. It was a perfectly viable, if regional, starting point.
Do we know where he got his yeast, that all-important ingredient?
We don't know the exact strain, but the sources strongly suggest it was sourced locally in County Kildare, perhaps even propagated from the White Hart Inn itself.
So Leixlip was the training ground. But the major move, the moment that really changed his destiny, was the relocation to Dublin in 1759.
It was. And this move, much like his inheritance, was a matter of seizing an opportunity created by chaos.
A classic case of buying low during a financial meltdown.
Absolutely. The year 1759 coincided with massive economic instability caused by the ongoing 7 Years' War. This global conflict triggered a severe financial crisis in Ireland.
Banks were collapsing.
Banks were collapsing, and there was an abundance of affordable, distressed property in Dublin. Guinness recognized that this crisis offered a generational chance to secure a massive industrial site at a fraction of its true value.
And the property he targeted was colossal. The site at St. James's Gate. It wasn't just a small shop. It was an abandoned industrial complex.
It was enormous. The site covered 4 acres. Crucially, it had been completely unused for 9 years, which explains its depressed price. But the structures were still there.
What was on the site?
A functioning brewhouse, a gristmill, 2 malt houses, and stables for dray horses. It was a ready-made industrial facility just waiting for a capital infusion and an entrepreneurial driver.
And beyond the existing infrastructure, the location itself was strategically brilliant for the future. You mentioned the Grand Canal. Why was that so vital?
The location was a masterstroke for future logistics. At the time, bulk transport, especially of heavy materials like barley, malt, and casks of beer, was inefficient and expensive by road. Ireland was planning this massive infrastructure project, the Grand Canal, and its planned terminus was to be situated just outside St. James's Gate.
So he was thinking ahead.
Years ahead. This meant that once the canal was operational, the brewery would have unparalleled access to efficient, cheap transport for raw materials coming in and finished product going out. This foresight, securing land based on future infrastructure, is a hallmark of his business genius.
And this brings us to the detail everyone knows, but few truly understand the context of. The contractual arrangement he signed on December 31st, 1759, the legendary 9,000-year lease.
The terms which he leased from the Rainsford family are why this detail is so famous. He paid £100 down payment, which we established was substantial capital.
And then the annual payment.
An annual payment of just $45. And the duration, 9 millennia. It's almost unbelievable when you say it out loud.
You have to wonder, was this truly an expression of long-term vision on Guinness's part? Or does the extraordinary length and low rent simply show how worthless the abandoned property was considered by people at the time?
I think it's likely a combination of both. The Rainsford family probably saw the property as derelict. It had been unused for 9 years. They were probably thrilled to secure any annual income, viewing the £45 as essentially permanent maintenance income.
So for them, it's a win. They're getting money from a dead asset.
Exactly. But for Guinness, it was a guarantee. It locked in his main competitive advantage, low fixed operational costs, for a practically infinite duration. It removed the risk of rising rents and potential relocation, allowing him to focus solely on expansion. That security, bought during a market collapse, is the financial bedrock of the entire enterprise. It immediately locks his entrepreneurial spirit into history as the ultimate long-term thinker.
Securing the property was one thing, but running a business in 18th century Dublin was a constant battle. The conflict that really defined his early career at St. James's Gate and shows his tenacity was this decade-long water dispute with the Dublin Corporation.
This conflict really illustrates the precarious nature of early industrial ventures and, well, Guinness's unwillingness to back down.
So what was the issue?
The core issue was that the previous owner, a man named Giles Mee, had signed 2 separate leases back in 1729, one for the land and one for the water supply from the city.
Okay.
When Mee left and the brewery went dormant in 1750, the water lease was completely forgotten. When Guinness arrived, he just started drawing water, claiming the original lease terms afforded him water free of tax or pipe money.
But by 1773, the powerful Dublin Corporation, the local government, they caught on. They started complaining that Guinness was using excessive water and demanding payment. How did Guinness respond to that?
He argued his case vehemently, citing the forgotten lease. But the situation escalated dramatically over the next 2 years. In April 1775, the corporation decided to enforce their claim physically.
What did they do?
They discovered Guinness had altered his pipe system to draw even more water onto his property without their permission, and they sent officials and laborers to physically cut off the supply.
And this is where the story truly becomes legend, the famed pickaxe standoff.
Indeed. The sources recount that Arthur Guinness met the municipal workers and officials with a pickaxe in his hands.
You're kidding.
Not at all. He threatened to dig his own channel directly from the River Liffey, or perhaps even use the pickaxe for more immediate purposes if they attempted to interrupt his water supply. This wasn't just a legal threat. It was a physical demonstration of his determination to defend his operational independence.
That's incredible. That anecdote wasn't just a tough business move. It instantly established his reputation as this hard-nosed, fiercely protective businessman.
A man who would use any means necessary to secure his resources.
That kind of defiance against the powerful Dublin Corporation must have been high stakes.
It was. They eventually agreed to settle the matter in the courts, and the dispute dragged on for a full decade. Finally, in 1785, a resolution was reached. Guinness agreed to lease the water from the city of Dublin for a fixed annual charge of just £10.
So he won, essentially.
He won the war. He maintained his supply and secured a nominal annual fee. It highlights the immense struggles involved in establishing a major industry back then, but Guinness came out on top.
Even after securing the water, Guinness was not the market leader. Tax information from the mid-1760s shows he was still producing less than local rivals like Taylor and Thwaites. And more significantly, the dominant beer in Dublin was imported English porter.
And this commercial reality forced the greatest strategic pivot of the company, the shift from ale to porter.
Which was a genius market adaptation.
It was. Ale was the traditional Irish drink, but the popular, fashionable, and profitable drink was London-style porter, a dark, heavily hopped, robust beer designed for urban consumption. Guinness realized he couldn't compete with English on price or tradition, but he could compete on quality and local production.
So when did he make the switch?
He tentatively introduced porter to his ale-heavy production line in 1778.
And how quickly did this dark beer take over the operation?
Extremely quickly. Within 5 years, porter became the core focus. By 1783, it dominated his marketing materials. He even made a telling statement to a parliamentary committee at the time, insisting that a porter buys none but the best, as none else will answer. He recognized the inherent demand for quality in this specific style.
So the numbers must reflect that shift.
They do. The internal documents confirm it. Guinness's 1796 memoranda book shows that porter output at St. James's Gate was already 5 times larger than his remaining ale production.
And the final symbolic moment came in 1799.
Yes, on April 22nd, 1799, Arthur Guinness formally brewed his last ale. He permanently declared St. James's Gate a porter brewery. This wasn't just a recipe change, it was a complete and final commitment to a new, commercially viable product category.
And this pivot led directly to a crucial innovation that secured the brand's future global scope, the creation of a stout designed for export.
Exactly. The product that became known as the Foreign Extra Stout was rooted in this early innovation. Guinness experimented with what he called West India Porter.
Why that name?
Well, to ensure the beer could survive the long, arduous, often months-long overseas voyages to the Caribbean and other colonies, he significantly increased the hop content. Hops are a natural preservative, and increased the alcohol content.
So it was a practical necessity.
It was. This higher gravity, heavily hopped formulation stabilized the beer for travel and created a distinct, powerful flavor profile that became the crucial basis for what is now known worldwide as Guinness Foreign Extra Stout, a direct product of market adaptation and innovative chemistry.
His success wasn't confined to brewing within the walls of St. James's Gate, however. His professional life quickly expanded into political advocacy for the entire Irish industry.
This is a critical dimension of his success. Arthur Guinness used his standing to become a powerful political voice. As a prominent figure in the Dublin Corporation of Brewers, he served first as warden and later as master.
And those positions gave him a platform.
They gave him direct access to lobby the Irish Parliament regarding trade policy. He understood that industrial success relied on a favorable political environment.
And the most critical political battle he fought was against restrictive English trade policy. This is where we see the immense economic pressure domestic Irish industry faced.
Alongside his fellow brewer, George Thwaites, Guinness petitioned the Irish House of Commons in 1773 against a devastating taxation policy. Now listen to this. The policy taxed domestic Irish quarter at a rate 5 times greater than beer imported from England.
5 times. So the British tax system was actively subsidizing imported English beer.
Exactly. It made it almost impossible for Irish brewers to grow and compete domestically, let alone export.
That sounds like an existential threat to Irish manufacturing. How did he manage to fight back against a policy that seemed designed to suppress Irish commerce?
Timing was key. This challenge came to a head 4 years later in 1777, during a period of intense instability caused by the American Revolutionary War.
So Britain was distracted and needed to keep Ireland on side.
Precisely. The crisis forced the British government to make concessions to the Irish Parliament to secure loyalty and resources. And amidst this political upheaval, the Irish House of Commons formally altered the tax code, removing that crippling subsidy for English imports.
And that changed everything.
It didn't just level the playing field for Guinness, it actively secured the Irish economy by opening up a massive market for the exportation of high-quality Irish porter into England and beyond.
The success was immediate and undeniable. Just 2 years after that tax change was enacted, Arthur Guinness was recognized as the official beer purveyor of Dublin Castle.
A massive official endorsement.
And a testament to his successful political maneuvering. His triumph was as much political as it was entrepreneurial.
It absolutely proves that Guinness was operating as a true industrial capitalist,
Sure.
recognizing that the battle for market share is fought in the legislature as much as it is in the brewhouse.
Having explored the business empire, let's shift focus to the man himself. His domestic life, his moral compass, and the complex views he held as a member of the Anglo-Irish gentry. It all begins with his marriage in 1761 to Olivia Whitmore.
Olivia Whitmore came from a wealthy and extremely well-connected background. Her dowry was a considerable £1,000, which provided another significant financial boost to the burgeoning brewery.
But it was more than just money.
Oh, much more. She was socially distinguished, claiming descent from William of Wykeham, a famous medieval statesman and bishop. Her connections were impeccable. She was a cousin to Henry Grattan,
The famous parliamentarian.
an influential member of the Irish Parliament known for advocating Catholic rights and legislative independence. Marrying Olivia integrated Guinness into Dublin's powerful social and political networks.
Despite their wealth and connections, the sources document significant personal tragedy within their marriage.
They did. It's a very human detail in this story of industrial scale. The sources note that Arthur and Olivia suffered 11 miscarriages throughout their marriage.
11. That's an enormous personal hardship, and it's often overlooked.
It is. However, they were eventually blessed with 10 children who survived infancy. 4 daughters and 6 sons, ensuring the continuity of the family line and the business.
Looking at those 6 sons, the succession plan for the brewery was not straightforward. The natural heir, the firstborn, chose a spiritual path rather than a commercial one.
That's correct. Their firstborn son, Hosea, born in 1765, opted for the clergy. He was highly educated, attending Oxford and Trinity College, Dublin, and eventually became the rector of St. Werburgh's Church, serving there until his death in 1841.
So that left the commercial responsibility to the next generation.
That responsibility fell to Arthur II, the third child. He was born in 1768 and inherited the massive brewery upon his father's death in 1803.
And his brothers helped him run it.
Yes, he was assisted by his younger brothers, Benjamin and William, who became full partners in 1808. This partnership led to the company being formally renamed Guinness, a Ben&WL Brewers, establishing the next century of the family enterprise.
But the family history isn't without significant financial disaster. We have to discuss Edward, whose story adds a touch of necessary human sympathy and realism to this narrative of success.
Edward's story is a profound reminder of the immense financial risk inherent in 18th and early 19th century capitalism. He decided to invest in a completely separate venture, an ironworks company.
Which failed.
It failed catastrophically. The sources indicate he fell into debilitating debt, became bankrupt, and in 1811 was forced to flee Ireland entirely.
Where did he go?
He escaped his creditors by relocating to the Isle of Man. It is a sad chapter, showing that even with the immense social capital and family backing of the Guinness name, the volatile nature of the economy could still lead to complete ruin and exile.
Shifting back to Arthur himself, the sources clearly establish him as a man driven by strong moral and religious convictions, a deeply devout Protestant.
He was a lifelong member of the established Church of Ireland, and his faith was foundational to his life and business. His personal motto, Speth Mea in Deo, which means "my hope is in God," was proudly displayed.
And his Christianity had a particular flavor to it.
It did. His brand of Christianity was heavily influenced by Methodism, particularly the movement led by John Wesley, which emphasized evangelical social work and active charity rather than just passive observance.
And this driving faith translated directly into his considerable philanthropic efforts across Dublin.
Absolutely. His philanthropy was structured and serious. He served as treasurer and later governor of Meath Hospital, ensuring that medical care was available to the populace. He also donated frequently to St. Patrick's Cathedral. A key area of his social reform was education for the working poor.
He was particularly interested in the Sunday school movement, wasn't he?
He was. Inspired by the English journalist Robert Raikes, who championed the idea, Guinness believed that instilling faith and basic morals early would eventually eliminate crime and disorder.
So it was a form of social control, in a way.
In a way, yes. In 1786, he opened Dublin's first Sunday school. He held a very strong conviction that the wealthy gentry, of which he was now a leading member, had a moral duty to set an impeccable example for the rest of society, especially the working classes.
And his belief in moderation extended to public displays of wealth and indulgence.
Indeed. We have a great anecdote detailing this. He once famously protested the traditional lavish feast held to celebrate a new alderman. Guinness suggested that the substantial amount of money spent on the feast should instead be donated to the king's hospital.
Why?
He argued that such an excessive occasion was prone to leading to drunken impropriety among the elite. He also consistently and fiercely opposed dueling among the Irish aristocracy, viewing it as a barbaric, deadly sport disguised as a point of honor, though his efforts to end the practice were ultimately unsuccessful.
It's important, though, to clarify his position on alcohol consumption given his profession. Did he ever entertain the idea of teetotalism?
No, he did not. While he advocated for moderation and morality, Guinness and his fellow brewers strongly attributed societal drunkenness and depravity to the consumption of hard liquor, particularly gin and whiskey.
Not to beer.
Not to beer. They often promoted porter as a safer, more nourishing, and more moderate alternative to spirits. So his moral code existed entirely within the context of encouraging moderate beer consumption.
This brings us to the most complex and, frankly, paradoxical aspect of Arthur Guinness's life, his political duality. He managed to be both a powerful reformer who championed Catholic rights and an unyielding loyalist who opposed Irish nationalism.
This duality is vital to understanding the entire Anglo-Irish position in the late 18th century. On one hand, yes, he was a strong advocate for Catholic civic rights. He believed they should be allowed to fully participate in politics and society.
And he practiced what he preached.
He did. Within his own brewery, he personally hired Catholics, treating them fairly, and advocated vociferously against the penal laws that restricted their ability to enter certain professions or own property.
So, he supported inclusion and economic participation, but this support stopped abruptly when it came to organized, revolutionary political action.
Absolutely. Despite his sympathy for Catholic civic inclusion, he was vehemently opposed to the Irish Rebellion of 1798. This rebellion was an attempt by the United Irishmen, a group largely composed of Presbyterian radicals and some Catholic sympathizers, to overthrow British rule and establish an independent republic.
And Guinness saw this as
Dangerous, violent, and economically suicidal.
What were his core reasons for this staunch loyalism?
The sources cite several. Firstly, he deeply disliked the immense violence and bloodshed that ensued. Secondly, the rebellion caused massive economic disruption, which, as a major industrialist, he naturally viewed with intense disapproval.
And there was a personal reason, too.
Finally, and perhaps most personally, his son John was wounded during the fighting. This personal tragedy cemented the family's opposition to the movement and its aims.
This opposition, despite his general social liberalism, placed him directly in conflict with the burgeoning Irish nationalist movement.
It did. It earned him the lasting fury of some Irish nationalists. The sources record that they specifically referred to his beer as his Black Protestant Porter.
A political insult?
The direct political insult, signaling his loyalty to the Protestant ascendancy and the crown, despite the fact that his product was increasingly consumed by all classes and religions. He was walking the exceptionally delicate political tightrope of the loyalist gentry during a period of revolutionary ferment across Europe.
A time when any movement toward republicanism was viewed as an existential threat to the social order, especially after the French Revolution.
Precisely. So while he wanted fair economic conditions and civic rights for Catholics, he fundamentally feared political radicalism and revolution. This complex position, supporting the people but opposing the movement, is what defines his political legacy.
A conservative reformer.
His priority was stability, order, and economic growth under the crown, a position shared by most of the wealthy Anglo-Irish industrialists of the time.
As his political and social life continued, so did his industrial expansion, right up until the end of his life. Where did he live during the peak of his career?
In 1764, the Guinness family moved out of the center of Dublin to Beaumont House, a significant estate north of the city. This move was typical of successful industrialists who sought status and space away from the grime of the growing urban center.
And his commitment to vertical integration controlling the supply chain also expanded beyond the St. James's Gate brewery itself.
Yes. By 1790, he constructed two large flour mills in Kilmainham, known collectively as the Hibernian Mills. This shows his dedication to expanding infrastructure, ensuring he had reliable sources for the malt and grain required for his increasingly large-scale porter production, rather than depending entirely on outside suppliers.
And that strategic pivot from ale to porter paid off massively in terms of sheer industrial output. Let's quantify that success at the time of his death.
The numbers are staggering. In 1796, before the final ale production stopped, the St. James's Gate Brewery was producing roughly 198,000 pints per month.
Which is already a lot.
It is. But by the time of Arthur Guinness's death in 1803, just 7 years later, That volume had surged to an astonishing 724,000 monthly points.
That is explosive growth.
It is. And it underscores the complete success of his business timing, his innovative product formulation, and his victorious political lobbying. He established St. James's Gate as a true industrial powerhouse.
Arthur Guinness died on January 23, 1803, at Beaumont House, aged 78.
His burial was a high-profile event, overseen by his clergyman son Hosea. His remains were carried from Beaumont to the parish church of Otter Ard in County Kildare, where he was laid to rest beside his mother.
And he was buried with the crest he always believed was his.
Interestingly, yes. The funeral bier was reportedly adorned with the McGuinness family crest, demonstrating the enduring power of his self-identified lineage.
His obituary in the Dublin Evening Post reflects the high regard in which he was held by the Dublin elite, praising him not just as a businessman, but as a moral force.
It was extremely glowing. It summarized his life beautifully. The worthy and the good will regret him because his life has been useful and benevolent and virtuous. This confirms his reputation as a man of high moral character was firmly established during his lifetime.
His will formalized the enormous financial success he had achieved. What were the specifics of his estate?
His estate was valued at £23,000 upon his death. To put that in context, that was a fortune far exceeding the vast majority of his contemporaries.
And the will took care of his family.
It did. It ensured their stability. Beaumont House and his investment properties were bequeathed to Hosea, the clergyman. Arthur II had already taken the reins of the brewery. Benjamin and William, who were soon to become partners, received £1,500 apiece. He provided significant dowries of £2,000 for his unmarried daughters, ensuring their financial security. And his widow, Olivia, was left his Gardner Street house, his carriage, and a guaranteed fixed annual income of £200.
The foundation he established obviously extended far beyond the 19th century and into the modern corporate environment we recognize today.
Indeed. The Guinness Company continued its family-run legacy for generations, eventually becoming Guinness plc. The major modern transformation occurred in 1997 when Guinness plc merged with Grand Metropolitan, creating the massive beverage conglomerate we now know as Diageo.
And the brand remains an absolute global powerhouse.
It does. The sources indicate that as recently as 2018, the brand contributed to Diageo's net sales of $12.2 billion for that fiscal year.
And even though the operation has changed and modernized, the St. James's Gate site remains central to the brand's history and identity.
Absolutely. While some production facilities have been modernized or closed, the original 4-acre site that Arthur leased for 9,000 years remains an essential anchor. A large portion of it was renovated into the Guinness Storehouse, a heritage center and tourist attraction that opened in 2000. It connects millions of visitors annually directly back to that original contested piece of real estate.
And his philanthropic spirit, driven by those evangelical Methodist influences, also lives on through the modern company structure.
In 2009, to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of that lease, the company established the Arthur Guinness Fund. This fund specifically awards financing and mentoring to businesses and organizations focused on social reform and entrepreneurship, directly mirroring Arthur's 18th century commitment to social work and community development.
Finally, we should mention how the man himself has been commemorated in Ireland.
He continues to be a point of national recognition. And Post, the Irish Postal Service, has released commemorative stamps in both 1959 and 2009.
And there was Arthur's Day.
There was. The company experimented with a global celebration called Arthur's Day from 2009 to 2014, which was eventually canceled. But this was replaced by Arthur's Way, which is a heritage trail connecting significant locations in his life across Kildare, including Selbridge, Leixlip, and his final resting place at Otter Ard. The man's life is still very much woven into the physical and social fabric of Ireland. So if we synthesize all the rich details gleaned from the source material, we see that Arthur Guinness was successful not by accident, but due to a series of strategic high-stakes decisions. The first was his acute business timing, securing the massive St. James's Gate site during the financial crisis of 1759, which locked in incredibly low fixed costs for 9,000 years.
The foundation of everything.
The second was his fierce, even physical protection of his resources, exemplified by the pickaxe standoff during the water dispute. The third was his strategic recognition of the market and the decisive pivot from traditional ale to the dominant, modern porter, leading to innovations like the 4 Extra Stout.
And the fourth.
And finally, his mastery of the political landscape, successfully lobbying against the restrictive tax code that favored foreign competition, which transformed Irish porter into a viable export commodity.
What ultimately defines Arthur Guinness, and what we should reflect on, is that incredible political paradox. He leveraged his powerful position as a member of the Anglo-Irish gentry to fight for genuine social change, championing Catholic civic rights, hiring them, and fighting restrictive laws. Yet, he was simultaneously a fierce loyalist, earning the scorn of Irish nationalists who coined the term Black Protestant Porter for his unyielding opposition to the revolutionary independence movement of 1798.
It's a fundamental contradiction.
This duality, sympathizing with the populace while staunchly opposing political radicalism, perfectly illustrates the complex and treacherous tightrope that the wealthy industrialists of his generation had to walk during that revolutionary era. He was a conservative reformer, determined to improve society without dismantling the political structure that made his success possible.
It is the essential conflict that underlies the entire story.
Thanks for listening.